The towering men turned to stare before she even managed to set down her bright pink range bag. The local shooting club was not accustomed to seeing someone like Olivia, a kindergarten teacher with zero military background, attempting to join their Sunday practice sessions. Their dismissive glances said everything. This place belonged to serious shooters, not amateurs who had only fired a gun twice in their lives. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. "You sure this is where you meant to be, miss?" called out a bearded man with tattooed forearms, his voice carrying over the concrete firing line. "The beginner class meets on Wednesdays." Olivia stood straighter, fighting the urge to turn around and leave. She tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear and continued unpacking her modest equipment, a simple .22 caliber pistol her father had given her for protection. It was nothing like the impressive arsenal surrounding her, where seasoned shooters displayed custom rifles worth thousands of dollars. "I know what day it is," she replied quietly, her confidence wavering under their scrutiny. She had come here with a purpose, driven by something none of these men could possibly understand. Last month's break-in at her apartment had left her feeling vulnerable, and the responding officer had suggested learning to properly handle a firearm might help her regain a sense of security. The range buzzed with the energy of competition. Several men wore military-style clothing adorned with patches indicating their past service. Others sported tactical gear branded with logos of gun manufacturers. Olivia, in her simple jeans and blue button-up shirt, looked completely out of place. To her right, a group of men gathered around someone she instantly recognized as Carson Reynolds, a local celebrity in shooting circles. His YouTube channel showcasing long-range shooting techniques had over 3 million subscribers. He moved with practiced confidence, demonstrating proper form as he fired off several rounds that grouped tightly in the center of a distant target. "That's how it's done, boys," he announced, turning to accept nods of approval from his admirers. His gaze lingered on Olivia for a moment, a smirk forming beneath his carefully groomed beard. "We've got fresh meat today." The range officer, a retired police sergeant named Frank, approached Olivia with a clipboard. "You've got your paperwork? Safety certification?" His tone wasn't unkind, but his eyes held doubt. "Yes, sir," she replied, handing over her documents. "I completed the basic safety course last month." Frank reviewed her papers, nodding slowly. "Lane 12 is open. Basic targets only, no rapid fire for beginners." He pointed toward an available shooting station at the far end of the range. Olivia thanked him and made her way to her assigned spot, aware of the sideways glances following her progress. Carson's booming voice carried across the range as he regaled his followers with stories of competitions he'd dominated. His expensive rifle gleamed under the fluorescent lights, its scope alone probably worth more than everything Olivia owned. She settled at her station, carefully arranging her minimal equipment. Her hands trembled slightly as she loaded the magazine with Prishru. 22 rounds. The fluorescent lights overhead illuminated the basic paper target positioned 15 yards downrange, the closest and largest target available. Even at this distance, hitting the center circle consistently had proven challenging during her limited practice sessions. "You're holding it wrong," came a deep voice from behind her. Olivia turned to find a tall man observing her stance. Unlike the others, he wore no tactical gear, just worn jeans and a faded navy blue t-shirt that stretched across broad shoulders. His face was weathered, with lines etched around serious gray eyes that seemed to assess everything with methodical precision. A short, neatly trimmed beard framed a strong jawline. Nothing about him sought attention, yet something in his quiet demeanor commanded it anyway. "Excuse me," she managed, lowering her pistol. "Your grip," he replied simply. "It's not stable. May I?" He gestured toward her hands. Olivia hesitated, then nodded. The man stepped closer, adjusting her fingers on the pistol's grip. His hands were calloused but moved with surprising gentleness. "Higher on the backstrap," he instructed. "Firm, but not white-knuckled. Your support hand needs to create tension against your dominant hand." She followed his guidance, immediately feeling the difference in stability. "Thank you, mister." "Just call me Daniel," he replied, stepping back to observe her corrected stance. Nothing in his demeanor matched the condescending attitudes of the other men. From the center of the range, Carson's voice rose above the general chatter. "Hey, Matthews! Didn't expect to see you slumming it at the public range today." Daniel, or Matthews apparently, barely acknowledged the greeting with a slight nod before turning his attention back to Olivia. "Try it now. Focus on your breathing. Exhale halfway and hold before squeezing. Don't pull the trigger." Olivia realigned her sights on the target, following Daniel's instructions. She squeezed the trigger during her respiratory pause, bracing for the pistol's recoil. The shot landed in the 7 ring. Not perfect, but better than her previous attempts. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Again," Daniel said. "Same process." She repeated the sequence 5 more times, each shot landing closer to center than the last. A small smile formed on her lips as the final round punched through the 9 ring, nearly touching the bullseye. "There you go," Daniel nodded, satisfaction briefly crossing his features. Consistency comes from repeating the correct technique, not from expensive equipment. This last comment seemed directed at Carson, who had wandered over with 2 of his followers. He carried an elaborate tactical rifle with multiple accessories attached to its rails. "Playing instructor today, Matthews?" Carson's voice dripped with false camaraderie. Didn't realize the mighty had fallen so far. Daniel didn't respond to the bait, keeping his focus on Olivia's technique. "You know who this is?" Carson asked Olivia, jerking a thumb toward Daniel. "Former Navy SEAL, Team 6 if the rumors are true, though nobody knows why he disappeared from the circuit after taking national championship 3 years running." Daniel's expression remained neutral, but Olivia noticed a slight tension in his jaw. "Some say he lost his edge," Carson continued, clearly enjoying the opportunity to needle someone of Daniel's apparent caliber. Others think he couldn't handle the pressure of sponsorship deals. Either way, haven't seen him at a serious competition in 2 years? 2 years. 3 months, Daniel replied evenly, his eyes never leaving Olivia's target. "Your grouping is improving. Try adjusting your stance slightly, left foot forward another inch." Carson frowned at being ignored. "Well, since you're giving out free lessons, why not show the lady what real shooting looks like? Unless you're worried about embarrassing yourself." Several onlookers had gathered, drawn by the growing tension. Frank, the range officer, watched carefully from his station, ready to intervene if necessary. Daniel finally turned to face Carson directly. "This is her lane, her practice time. I'm just offering a few pointers." "Come on, Matthews," Carson pressed, his voice louder now, ensuring everyone could hear. "1 magazine, best grouping. Let's see if the legend still has it." Olivia looked between the 2 men, uncomfortable with being the center of this unexpected standoff. "It's okay," she told Daniel quietly. "I don't mind watching." After a moment of consideration, Daniel gave a single nod. 1 magazine. Then we let her get back to practice." Carson grinned triumphantly, gesturing toward the 50-yard targets, significantly farther than where Olivia had been practicing. "Those will do. Standard competition rules." The range officer called a temporary ceasefire so they could set up fresh targets. Olivia stepped back, watching as Daniel calmly checked his pistol, a worn but well-maintained Glock that lacked the flashy modifications of Carson's firearms. 10 rounds, tightest group wins, Carson announced, making sure everyone within earshot knew the terms. "Ladies first." He gestured toward Daniel with a smirk. Several spectators chuckled at the jab, but Daniel remained unruffled. He stepped up to the firing line, assumed his stance, and fired 10 rounds in smooth succession. His movements were economical, almost mechanical in their precision. When he finished, Carson immediately took his place, making a show of adjusting his stance and equipment before firing his sequence. His technique was textbook perfect, clearly practiced for both effectiveness and appearance. The range officer brought both targets forward for inspection. The crowd gathered closer to see the results. Carson's grouping was impressive, all 10 shots within a 3-inch circle. A competitive shooter's dream, but Daniel's target revealed something extraordinary. All 10 rounds had passed through virtually the same hole, creating a single ragged opening just slightly larger than one bullet diameter. A hushed murmur swept through the spectators. Even Carson seemed momentarily speechless, staring at the target with barely concealed disbelief. "Like riding a bicycle," Daniel said quietly, holstering his pistol. Carson recovered quickly, forcing a laugh. "Lucky string. We should try rifles. See if your luck holds at actual distance." "Another time," Daniel replied, turning back to Olivia. "This lane belongs to someone else." The crowd began to disperse, some whispering about what they'd just witnessed, others asking questions about Daniel's background. Carson lingered, clearly reluctant to cede the spotlight, but eventually rejoined his group after Frank pointedly reminded everyone about range protocols. "That was amazing," Olivia said when they were relatively alone again. "How did you learn to shoot like that?" Daniel shrugged, the motion suggesting he found the question irrelevant. "Practice. Thousands of hours. Hundreds of thousands of rounds." He nodded toward her pistol. "But that's not what you need right now." "What do you mean?" "You're here because you're afraid of something," he stated, rather than asked. A 22 target pistol won't address the real issue. Olivia felt exposed, as though he had somehow read her thoughts. "How did you—" "Your hands shake when you're not focused on shooting. You flinch at loud noises. Classic signs of someone who's experienced something traumatic." His assessment was clinical but not unkind. "The gun isn't the solution. Confidence is." Before she could respond, Daniel checked his watch. "I need to head out. Same time tomorrow?" The question caught her off guard. "You want to help me practice?" "If you're interested in actually learning, not just checking a box." He studied her face, seemingly gauging her commitment. Self-defense isn't about hitting paper targets. It's about mindset, awareness, decisive action. "Yes," she answered, surprising herself with her certainty. "I'd like that." Daniel nodded once. "Tomorrow, then. Bring comfortable clothes you can move in. We'll use the tactical bay instead of the firing line." As he turned to leave, Carson's voice carried from across the range. "Hey, Matthews. You coming to the regional qualifier next month? Or are you still hiding from real competition?" Daniel didn't acknowledge the taunt, continuing toward the exit with the same measured pace. Just before reaching the door, he paused and looked back at Olivia. "One more thing," he called. "Leave the pink bag at home. Nothing advertises target quite like announcing you're carrying a firearm." With that practical advice delivered, he disappeared through the exit, leaving Olivia standing alone at her lane. She turned back to her target, noting how her shots had improved after just a few minutes of proper instruction. Something about Daniel's approach had cut through weeks of frustration. The next morning, Olivia arrived at the range wearing athletic leggings and a fitted t-shirt as suggested. She'd traded her bright pink range bag for a nondescript backpack. The Sunday crowd had thinned considerably on this Monday morning, with only a few dedicated shooters occupying the main firing line. Frank nodded in recognition as she signed in. Matthews called ahead, said you'd be using Tactical Bay 3. He handed her a different colored wristband than the standard range admission. "He's already back there setting up." She followed the marked path around the main building, finding a separate area divided into bays with high concrete walls for privacy and safety. Each bay resembled a small room without a ceiling, designed for dynamic shooting practice rather than stationary target work. Daniel was arranging a series of objects in Bay 3, cardboard silhouettes, wooden barriers, and what appeared to be a heavy duffel bag. He wore similar attire to yesterday: simple jeans, boots, and a gray t-shirt. No tactical gear, no unnecessary equipment. "Right on time," he noted without looking up from his work. "Good. Thanks for doing this," Olivia said, setting down her backpack. "I don't know why you're helping me, but I appreciate it." Daniel straightened, regarding her with those assessing gray eyes. "Everyone deserves to feel secure. Knowledge helps with that." He gestured toward the setup. "Today isn't about shooting. It's about understanding confrontation dynamics." For the next 2 hours, Daniel methodically broke down the fundamental principles of self-defense: distance management, threat assessment, environmental awareness. He demonstrated how to use barriers effectively, how to move while maintaining stability, and most importantly, how to recognize when retreat was the optimal strategy. "The best gunfight is the one you avoid entirely," he stated, positioning her behind a barricade. "A gun is a tool of last resort, not first response." Olivia absorbed everything with growing interest. This was nothing like the basic safety course she'd taken, which had focused primarily on not accidentally shooting herself or others. Daniel's instruction approached self-defense holistically, addressing mindset as much as mechanics. "Why are you really here?" Daniel asked during a water break. The question came without preamble, his direct manner now familiar to her. Olivia hesitated, then decided honesty matched his straightforwardness. "Someone broke into my apartment last month while I was sleeping. I woke up to him standing in my bedroom doorway." The memory sent a cold shiver through her despite the warm day. "I screamed and he ran. Police never caught him." Daniel nodded, processing this information. "And now you can't sleep through the night." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "No, I keep hearing noises, imagining someone coming back." "A gun won't fix that," he said bluntly. "Might make it worse, actually. Fear and firearms are a dangerous combination." "Then why are you teaching me?" "Because knowledge displaces fear." He stood, signaling the break was over. "Let's continue." As they resumed training, Olivia noticed Carson arriving at the main range, his customary entourage in tow. He spotted them in the tactical bay and changed direction, heading toward their position with purposeful strides. "Well, well," Carson called as he approached the entrance to their bay. "Private lessons continue, I see." Daniel continued his demonstration without acknowledging the interruption. "When moving between cover positions, keep your center of gravity low. Speed is good, but stability is better." Carson leaned against the entrance post. "You know, if you wanted actual professional instruction," he addressed Olivia directly, "my rates are reasonable considering my competition background." "We're in the middle of something," Daniel replied evenly, still focused on the exercise. "I can see that," Carson smirked. "Playing commando in the dirt, very tactical." He made air quotes around the last word. "Meanwhile, actual competitions are won on the firing line, not crawling around pretending to be in Fallujah." At this, Daniel finally turned toward Carson. Something in his expression made the younger man straighten slightly. "The difference," Daniel said quietly, "between competition shooting and combat shooting is that in competition, everyone agrees where the firing line is." An uncomfortable silence followed this statement. Even Carson seemed to recognize he'd crossed some invisible boundary. He cleared his throat, attempting to recover his bravado. "Anyway, the regional qualifier registration closes Friday. Word is several sponsors will be scouting for new talent." He glanced meaningfully at Olivia. "Proper instruction could set you apart from other beginners. My card." He extended a glossy business card toward her. Before Olivia could respond, Daniel spoke. "We'll keep that in mind. If you'll excuse us, we have limited time with this bay." Carson lingered a moment longer, clearly wanting to say more, but eventually retreated toward the main range. Once he was out of earshot, Olivia turned to Daniel. "What did you mean about the firing line?" Daniel regarded her thoughtfully, as if deciding how much to explain. In a real confrontation, there are no rules, no designated positions, no clear start signals. Carson shoots at paper that doesn't shoot back, from predetermined distances, with optimal lighting and stable footing. He gestured to their surroundings. Reality is messier. They continued training until early afternoon, by which time Olivia's muscles ached from maintaining unfamiliar positions. Yet she felt more confident than after any previous session with her firearm, despite having fired exactly 0 rounds today. As they packed up the training materials, Daniel paused, seemingly making a decision. "I have something that might help you more than that." 22. He opened his own range bag and removed a compact rifle that had been broken down into its component parts. It was unlike anything Olivia had seen before, shorter than traditional rifles, with a collapsible stock and a rail system for attachments. "This is an MK-18 Mod 0, he explained, assembling the pieces with practiced efficiency. 10-inch barrel, 5.56 mm caliber. Standard issue for close-quarters operations in certain specialized units." "It looks military," Olivia observed, unsure what else to say about the weapon. It is. Or was. Daniel completed the assembly, checking the chamber to ensure it was clear before handing it to her. Much more effective for home defense than a pistol. Easier to shoot accurately under stress. Less risk of overpenetration with the right ammunition. Olivia accepted the rifle cautiously, surprised by its relatively light weight. I can't take this. It must be worth. Its value is in its reliability, Daniel interrupted. I have others. This one needs a home where it will serve a purpose beyond collecting dust. Is this legal? She asked, examining the compact weapon. Completely. It's registered as a short-barreled rifle. All paperwork is in order. He showed her a folder containing documentation. I'll help you transfer it properly. Olivia was overwhelmed by the gesture. I don't know what to say. This is too much. Consider it an investment in your peace of mind. Daniel began demonstrating the rifle's controls. This is the safety. Here's how you load and clear it. The sighting system is zeroed for indoor distances. Perfect for apartment defense. For the next hour, he thoroughly explained every aspect of the weapon's operation, having her practice manipulating its controls until the movements became fluid. They didn't fire it. That would require different range permissions, but he promised to arrange that for their next session. As they finally prepared to leave, Olivia voiced the question that had been nagging at her. Why are you doing all this for me? You don't even know me. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, securing his equipment with methodical precision. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight she hadn't heard before. 6 years ago, my sister was attacked in her home. She had a restraining order against her ex-husband, had taken all the right legal precautions. None of it mattered. His movements remained steady, but his eyes had grown distant. She survived physically, but she never felt safe again. Olivia felt a chill despite the warm day. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry. Be prepared. He closed his range bag with finality. Knowledge and capability create options. Options create confidence. Confidence keeps fear at bay. And the rifle? She asked softly. Tools are just tools. It's the person wielding them that matters. He handed her a small notebook with detailed instructions written in precise handwriting. Practice these drills dry, without ammunition, every day. Next session is Wednesday, 0900. With that, Daniel shouldered his bag and walked toward the parking lot. Olivia watched him go, still processing everything that had transpired. The combat rifle, now secured in its case, represented something far beyond its mechanical function. It was a tangible vote of confidence from someone who clearly didn't offer such things lightly. As she gathered her own belongings, she noticed Carson watching from the main range, his expression unreadable at this distance. Something told her that Wednesday's session would not unfold without interruption. Wednesday morning arrived with a sense of anticipation Olivia hadn't felt in months. She'd spent the previous evening practicing the dry-fire drills Daniel had prescribed, working through the unfamiliar motions until her muscles ached. Sleep had come easier that night. Whether from physical exhaustion or newfound confidence, she couldn't say. She arrived at the range 15 minutes early, finding Daniel already waiting in Tactical Bay 3. Today, he'd set up different equipment, a series of steel targets at varying distances and several cardboard silhouettes partially obscured behind barriers. Morning, he greeted with a nod. You bring everything. Yes, Olivia replied, patting her nondescript backpack. The Mk-18 was secured inside, along with the ammunition Daniel had specified. Specialized rounds designed for maximum effectiveness, but minimal wall penetration. Good. Today we confirm 0 on the rifle and establish your baseline accuracy. He gestured toward the setup. Then we incorporate movement and decision-making. They began with basic familiarization. Daniel demonstrated proper mounting of the rifle, explaining how the compact design allowed for quick target acquisition in confined spaces, precisely the environment she might face in her apartment. Unlike the previous session's theoretical approach, today would involve live fire. Remember, Daniel instructed as she prepared for her first shots, this isn't a competition. Accuracy trumps speed. Speed comes with repetition. Olivia settled into position, bringing the rifle to her shoulder as practiced. The compact weapon felt substantial in her hands, not heavy, but purposeful. She aligned the holographic sight with the nearest target, exhaled halfway, and squeezed the trigger. The report was sharper than her .22 pistol, but the rifle's design mitigated much of the recoil. Her shot struck within 2 inches of center mass. "Good foundation," Daniel observed. "Adjust your cheek weld slightly. Consistency there translates to consistency downrange." For the next hour, he methodically refined her technique, addressing minor issues before they became ingrained habits. Each suggestion improved her results until she was consistently grouping shots within a palm-sized area at defensive distances. "You're a quick study," Daniel noted, his typically stoic expression showing a hint of approval. "Natural aptitude helps, but your focus is what's making the difference." Olivia felt a surge of pride at the understated compliment. "Having proper instruction makes everything clearer. The basic safety course I took barely covered stance, let alone practical application." Daniel nodded. "Most training focuses on passing arbitrary standards, not developing genuine capability." He began setting up for the next phase. Now we add complexity. The new drill involved moving between positions, identifying threats from non-threats, and making split-second decisions about when to engage. Daniel demonstrated first, moving with fluid efficiency that made the challenging course look effortless. Olivia's attempt was considerably less graceful. She stumbled once, mistakenly engaged a non-threat target, and took nearly 3 times as long to complete the sequence. "I'm sorry," she said, catching her breath. "That was terrible." "That was normal," Daniel corrected. "No one performs perfectly their first time under pressure. The point is to identify weaknesses and address them systematically." They were preparing to run the drill again when a familiar voice interrupted. "Playing war games again, Matthews?" Carson strode into the tactical bay, today accompanied by only 2 followers instead of his usual entourage. "Bit elaborate for teaching basic marksmanship, isn't it?" Daniel continued adjusting a target position without acknowledging the intrusion. "And what's this?" Carson's attention shifted to the rifle Olivia had set down. "That's military hardware. Bit excessive for a beginner, don't you think?" He reached toward the weapon. "Don't touch what isn't yours," Daniel said quietly, still not looking up from his task. Carson withdrew his hand, but his smile remained fixed. "Just curious what you're teaching our newcomer. Seems like you've escalated from basic pistol to combat rifle in what, 2 days?" He turned to Olivia. "You know most instructors recommend mastering fundamentals before jumping to tactical applications." "We're addressing specific needs," Daniel replied before Olivia could respond. "Not following a standardized curriculum." Of course. Carson's tone was conciliatory, but his expression suggested otherwise. "I just wonder if the lady knows what she's getting into, training with someone whose methods are so unorthodox." Now Daniel straightened, giving Carson his full attention. "Did you need something specific? We've reserved this bay until noon." "Actually, yes." Carson's demeanor shifted to something more businesslike. "The range manager asked me to inform all members about next month's qualification event. Regional champion gets an automatic entry to nationals, plus sponsorship opportunities." He produced several glossy flyers. "Thought your student might be interested in seeing what proper competition looks like." "We're focused on defensive applications, not competition," Daniel stated. Carson pressed on, addressing Olivia directly. "Competition improves all aspects of shooting. Pressure, precision, performance. It's the best way to measure real skill." He extended a flyer toward her. "You should come watch, even if you don't participate. See how the professionals operate." Olivia accepted the flyer more out of politeness than interest. "Thank you. I'll consider it." Seeming satisfied with a small victory, Carson lingered a moment longer. "Matthews knows all about competition pressure, don't you? 3-time national champion before you. What was it again? Retired?" Something in Daniel's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "We're in the middle of training. If there's nothing else—" "No, nothing else." Carson raised his hands in mock surrender. "Just extending a professional courtesy. See you around." He departed with a final meaningful glance at Olivia. When he was gone, Daniel immediately refocused on the training scenario. "Let's run it again. This time, prioritize accuracy over speed." Olivia hesitated. Can I ask you something first? Daniel paused, then gave a single nod. Why did you stop competing? From what Carson implied, you were at the top of your field. For a long moment, Daniel was silent, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured. Trophies started to seem meaningless after seeing what happens in places where the targets shoot back. He adjusted the sling on her rifle. Competition became theater. Artificial pressure, manufactured stakes. I lost interest. Though his answer was brief, Olivia sensed there was far more beneath the surface. But Daniel had already moved on, resetting the course for another run. Ready position, he instructed. Focus on smooth transitions between firing points. They continued training until noon, gradually incorporating more complex scenarios. By the final run, Olivia had improved dramatically, moving with greater confidence, making clearer decisions, and maintaining accuracy despite the added pressure. As they packed up their equipment, Daniel seemed to reach a decision. Tomorrow we train somewhere else. Not here? Olivia asked, surprised by the change. The range serves its purpose for basic skills, but artificial environments create artificial confidence. He handed her a small paper with an address written in the same precise handwriting as her drill notebook. My property, 20 acres, private range, more realistic training opportunities. The address indicated a location about 30 minutes outside the city, rural enough for privacy but not so remote as to be inaccessible. I'll be there, Olivia confirmed, carefully storing the paper in her wallet. Same time? Daniel nodded. Bring water and a lunch. We'll be working through the afternoon. That evening, curiosity got the better of Olivia. She searched Daniel's name online, finding sparse but impressive results. News articles confirmed Carson's claims. Daniel Matthews had indeed won the National Tactical Shooting Championship 3 consecutive years. Photos showed a slightly younger version of the man she knew, accepting trophies with the same stoic expression he maintained during their training sessions. The most recent articles, dated 2 years ago, speculated about his sudden withdrawal from competition. Some suggested burnout, others hinted at, quote, classified operations that had changed his perspective on competitive shooting. None provided concrete answers. One forum thread caught her attention. Participants discussed rumors that Matthews had been part of the operation that eliminated a high-value terrorist target overseas. The thread was full of speculation, but devoid of verifiable facts. Olivia closed her laptop, feeling as though she'd somehow invaded Daniel's privacy. Whatever his reasons for leaving competition behind, they were clearly personal. His skills and willingness to share them were what mattered now. The next morning, she followed her GPS to the address Daniel had provided. The paved road eventually gave way to gravel, leading to a modest cabin set against the backdrop of dense woods. A covered shooting range had been constructed to one side, while the surrounding property showed signs of regular use for training, obstacles, barricades, and what appeared to be a shoot house in the distance. Daniel emerged from the cabin as she parked, carrying a large duffel bag. Right on time, he noted with approval. We'll start with a property walkthrough, establish boundaries, and safety protocols. The tour revealed a training facility far more elaborate than she'd expected. Daniel had transformed the acreage into a comprehensive tactical training ground, complete with various scenario-specific areas. This is incredible, Olivia remarked as they completed the circuit. Did you build all this yourself? Most of it, Daniel confirmed. After leaving the teams, I needed a place to maintain skills. Commercial ranges have limitations. They began with a refresher on the previous day's drills, then progressively increased the complexity. Today's scenarios incorporated realistic elements absent from the public range, low light conditions, simulated stress factors, and environmental challenges like working around vehicles or through doorways. In a real confrontation, your heart rate spikes, fine motor skills deteriorate, tunnel vision sets in, Daniel explained as they prepared for a particularly challenging drill. We can't perfectly replicate that physiological response, but we can approximate it. The drill involved sprinting to elevate her heart rate before engaging targets, a simple but effective method to simulate stress. Olivia struggled initially, her carefully developed accuracy suffering under the added pressure. Again, Daniel instructed after her first attempt. This time, focus on your breathing during the transition. Control what you can control. By the third repetition, she'd adapted her technique, maintaining respectable accuracy despite the physical stress. Daniel nodded approval, then increased the difficulty further. They broke for lunch around midday, sitting at a rustic table outside the cabin. Olivia unwrapped the sandwich she'd brought while Daniel poured coffee from a thermos. "Can I ask you something personal?" she ventured after they'd eaten in companionable silence. Daniel's expression remained neutral, neither encouraging nor discouraging the question. "Why are you investing so much time in teaching me?" "I'm grateful, but this goes far beyond casual instruction." He considered the question carefully, turning his coffee mug in weathered hands. "When my sister was attacked, she had all the socially approved protections, restraining orders, emergency contacts, pepper spray. None of it mattered, because she lacked the mindset and tools for true self-reliance." He set the mug down. "Afterward, she asked me to teach her. I did, but the trauma had already settled in. She never regained her sense of security." A shadow crossed his features. "Prevention would have been better than response." "I'm sorry about your sister," Olivia said softly. "Is she..." "She moved overseas." "Australia." "Far from memories." Daniel stood, signaling an end to the conversation. "Break's over. Let's work on transition drills." The afternoon progressed with increasingly complex scenarios. Daniel demonstrated techniques for managing home defense situations, clearing rooms, using cover effectively, maintaining awareness in confined spaces. Each drill built upon previous lessons, creating a comprehensive framework for real-world application. "Final exercise," Daniel announced as the afternoon light began to fade. "Practical test of everything we've covered." He described a scenario mimicking Olivia's apartment layout, which he'd reconstructed using temporary barriers. The drill would simulate a nighttime intrusion, incorporating darkness, decision-making, and movement under pressure. "Remember, in reality, retreat is often the best option when possible," he emphasized. "This exercise assumes retreat is not an option." Olivia nodded, mentally preparing herself as Daniel explained the parameters. She would start in the simulated bedroom, respond to a triggered alarm, and navigate the scenario accordingly. He would observe but not intervene unless safety required it. "Ready?" he asked after she'd taken position. "Ready," she confirmed, settling into the starting point. Daniel hit a switch, plunging the area into near darkness with only minimal ambient light remaining. A loud alarm sound broke the silence, signaling the start of the exercise. Olivia moved precisely as they'd practiced, securing her weapon, establishing a defensive position, and methodically addressing the threat scenario. The darkness complicated matters, but the holographic sight on the MK-18 provided sufficient reference for target identification. She cleared the simulated apartment room by room, maintaining proper technique despite the challenging conditions. When she encountered the intruder target placed in the final room, she made a clean engagement, then secured the space as practiced. "Exercise complete," Daniel called, restoring the lights. "Assessment?" Olivia walked through her performance, identifying several areas for improvement without prompting. "I hesitated at the hallway junction, took too long transitioning between the living room and kitchen spaces, failed to check behind the door in the second room." Daniel nodded, adding a few observations of his own. Overall execution was solid. "You maintained awareness, used cover appropriately, and made correct engagement decisions." Coming from him, this constituted high praise. With regular practice, these movements become intuitive. As they packed up the training equipment, Daniel seemed to reach another decision. "There's something else you should understand about home defense." He led her to a small shed adjacent to the cabin, unlocking it to reveal a workshop space. Inside, various tools and components were organized with military precision. On one workbench lay what appeared to be disassembled firearms in various stages of maintenance. "Mechanical devices can fail," he stated, selecting a partially assembled pistol from the bench. "Especially under stress. Understanding basic armorer-level maintenance improves reliability." For the next hour, he demonstrated fundamental gunsmithing skills. How to detail strip the MK-18 beyond standard cleaning. How to identify potential wear points before they became problems. How to troubleshoot common malfunctions. Most people purchase a firearm, load it, and assume it will function perfectly when needed, Daniel explained as he reassembled the demonstration pistol with practiced efficiency. That assumption can be fatal. Olivia absorbed the technical information, asking questions about specific components and their functions. Daniel answered each inquiry thoroughly, clearly appreciating her attention to detail. As evening approached, they concluded the day's training. Daniel handed her a small kit containing specialized tools and spare parts for the MK-18. Practice daily, he instructed. Dry fire, malfunction drills, position transitions. 10 minutes is better than nothing. When should I come back? Olivia asked, already anticipating the next session. Saturday. Daniel considered something before adding, bring clothes you can get dirty. We'll be incorporating environmental factors. Rain, mud, awkward positions. Reality isn't clean or convenient. Olivia nodded, understanding the progression. Each training evolution built upon the last, systematically addressing aspects of self-defense beyond simply shooting at paper targets. As she prepared to leave, Daniel handed her a small device, a tactical flashlight modified with a pressure switch that could mount to the MK-18's rail system. Target identification is critical, he explained, especially in low light. Practice using this with your support hand while maintaining weapon control. Olivia accepted the gift, once again struck by his thoroughness. Thank you. For everything. Daniel merely nodded, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. Saturday, 08:00. She departed as the sun began to set, watching Daniel's figure in her rearview mirror as he returned to his cabin. The contrast between his solitary existence and the depth of knowledge he shared struck her anew. Whatever experiences had shaped him had created both walls and bridges, barriers to personal connection, but pathways for transmitting vital skills. On the drive home, Olivia reflected on how much had changed in just a few days. The fear that had been her constant companion since the break-in felt different now. Not gone, but transformed into something more manageable. Knowledge was indeed displacing fear, just as Daniel had promised. When she arrived at her apartment, she immediately set about implementing another of Daniel's recommendations, conducting a security assessment of her living space. She identified vulnerable points of entry, created mental response plans for various scenarios, and reorganized her bedroom to provide better defensive positions if needed. The MK-18, secured in its case, now occupied a quickly accessible but discreet location, the pink range bag and .22 pistol seemed almost childish in comparison, relics of a time when she'd thought basic familiarity with firearms would be sufficient. As she completed her evening routine, Olivia realized something had fundamentally shifted in her perspective. She no longer felt like a potential victim awaiting the next intrusion, but rather someone developing the capability to confront challenges effectively. The difference was subtle but profound. Her phone chimed with a notification, an email from Carson Reynolds, somehow obtained without her providing contact information. The message cordially invited her to observe an advanced shooting clinic he was conducting at the range on Friday, suggesting it would, quote, complement her current training with a more conventional approach. Olivia considered the invitation briefly, before declining with a polite but firm response. Whatever Carson's motivations, his technique seemed focused on winning competitions and accolades. Admirable in their context, but misaligned with her current priorities. She set her alarm for early morning, planning to incorporate Daniel's recommended dry fire practice before work. As she drifted toward sleep, she found herself wondering about the events that had transformed a championship shooter into the solitary instructor now sharing his hard-won knowledge with her. Whatever those circumstances might be, she was grateful for their result. For the first time since the break-in, she slept through the night without waking to investigate imagined noises. Friday afternoon found Olivia at her classroom desk, grading papers while her kindergarten students enjoyed their weekly art session with the school's specialist teacher. The cheerful chaos of small children finger painting provided a stark contrast to the disciplined training she'd been immersed in all week. "Earth to Olivia," came a voice, breaking her concentration. She looked up to find her colleague Diane leaning against the doorframe, coffee mug in hand. "Sorry," Olivia smiled, setting down her red pen. "Million miles away." "I can tell." Diane entered, sliding into a tiny student chair with practiced ease. "You seem different this week. More present, is that the right word?" Olivia considered this assessment. "Maybe focused is better. Whatever it is, it's working for you." Diane sipped her coffee. "The kids have noticed too." Tommy mentioned that Ms. Parker isn't jumping at loud noises anymore. This observation surprised Olivia. She hadn't realized her anxiety had been so apparent to her 5-year-old students. "I've been working through some things," she admitted. "Finding better ways to handle stress." "Good for you," Diane replied with genuine warmth. "Self-care is essential in this profession. Whatever you're doing, keep it up." She glanced at the wall clock. "Speaking of which, it's Friday. Any weekend plans?" Olivia thought of tomorrow's training session at Daniel's property. "Just some outdoor activities. Physical exercise. Fresh air." "Sounds healthy," Diane approved, rising from the tiny chair. "Well, I should collect my monsters from music. See you at Monday's staff meeting?" After Diane departed, Olivia returned to grading, but her thoughts drifted to her transformation over the past week. The change wasn't just in her newfound skills or knowledge about self-defense, it extended to how she carried herself through daily life. More aware, more confident, less reactive to sudden stimuli. When the final bell rang and she'd sent her students home for the weekend, Olivia found herself anticipating tomorrow's training rather than dreading another anxiety-filled weekend alone in her apartment. On her drive home, she passed the local range and noticed Carson's distinctive truck in the parking lot. True to his word, he was conducting his advanced clinic today. For a brief moment, she considered stopping. Perhaps there was value in observing different teaching methods. But something told her the clinic would only emphasize the contrast between competition shooting and Daniel's practical approach. At home, she devoted an hour to dry fire practice, working through the drills Daniel had prescribed. The movements felt more natural now, muscle memory beginning to form through repetition. After completing her exercises, she prepared her equipment for tomorrow's session, laying out clothes suitable for the environmental factors Daniel had mentioned. Her phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. "Regional qualifier registration closes tonight. Still space available if you're interested in seeing how your training measures up." "Carson?" Olivia stared at the message, wondering again how he'd obtained her contact information. The persistence struck her as both flattering and slightly concerning. She opted not to respond, setting the phone aside to focus on reviewing her notes from previous training sessions. Saturday morning dawned clear but cool, with scattered clouds suggesting the possibility of rain later, perfect conditions for the environmental factors Daniel had mentioned. Olivia arrived at his property precisely at 0800, finding him already setting up a series of stations throughout the wooded area behind the shooting range. "Morning," he greeted with his customary nod. "Coffee's ready inside if you need it." The small gesture of hospitality, unexpected from someone so reserved, made her smile. "Thanks. I'm good for now." Daniel looked less rested than usual, with faint shadows beneath his eyes suggesting a poor night's sleep. Still, his movements remained precise as he outlined the day's objectives. "Today we address environmental variables," he explained, leading her toward the first station. "Rain, mud, awkward shooting positions, physical exertion before engagement, all affect performance. The initial drill involved firing from uncomfortably twisted positions, simulating scenarios where perfect stance was impossible." Olivia struggled at first, finding it difficult to maintain accuracy while contorted around simulated barriers. "In reality, you rarely get a perfect firing platform," Daniel explained, demonstrating a technique for stabilizing the rifle against a tree trunk. "Adapt to what's available." As the morning progressed, so did the complexity of the scenarios. Daniel had constructed situations requiring her to engage targets while lying in mud, after crawling through underbrush and while balanced on uneven surfaces. Each evolution pushed her beyond conventional range practice, demanding adaptability and problem-solving. During a water break, Olivia noticed Daniel checking his phone with unusual frequency. "Expecting a call?" she asked, wiping mud from her forearms. He pocketed the device with a barely perceptible frown. "Just checking something." "Not important." His tone discouraged further inquiry. "Next station involves engaging targets after physical exertion. Tests your ability to control breathing and stabilize under cardiovascular stress." The drill required Olivia to sprint up a steep hill, then immediately engage targets at varying distances. Her first attempt was disastrous. Elevated heart rate and labored breathing destroyed her carefully developed accuracy. Again, Daniel instructed. This time, take 3 controlled breaths before acquiring your first target. Slow your respiratory rate deliberately. She tried once more, forcing herself to pause at the top of the hill despite burning lungs. The controlled breathing made a noticeable difference, allowing her to place acceptable shots despite her racing pulse. Better, Daniel acknowledged. In a real situation, your sympathetic nervous system activates fight or flight response. Fine motor control deteriorates. You compensate with training and technique. By midday, they'd progressed through increasingly difficult scenarios. Olivia was thoroughly exhausted, covered in mud, but experiencing the deep satisfaction that comes from pushing beyond perceived limitations. Her performance had improved with each repetition, adapting to conditions that would have seemed impossible just days ago. During their lunch break, they sat on the cabin's covered porch, watching as dark clouds gathered in the distance. The promised rain was approaching but hadn't yet arrived. "Your progress is significant," Daniel noted between bites of his sandwich. Coming from him, this constituted effusive praise. "I have a good teacher," Olivia replied. He acknowledged this with a slight inclination of his head. The best teaching only works with motivated students. A comfortable silence settled between them as they continued eating. Olivia found herself curious about the life Daniel had built here. Isolated but purposeful, austere but complete in its own way. "How long have you lived here?" she asked, gesturing to the property. Daniel considered the question. 3 years. Purchased it after leaving active service. "Do you ever miss it?" "The teams, I mean." A complicated expression crossed his features. "I miss the purpose, the clarity, the brotherhood." He set down his water bottle. "Don't miss the politics, or the toll." Before she could ask what he meant by the toll, Daniel's phone rang. He checked the screen, his expression shifting subtly before he silenced it without answering. "That's the 3rd call you've ignored," Olivia observed. "Is everything okay?" Daniel pocketed the phone with finality. "Registration deadline for the regional qualifier was last night. Range director's been calling competitors to confirm details." "You're competing?" she asked, surprised. "No." His tone discouraged further questions. "Break's over. We'll use the approaching storm for our next evolution. Reduced visibility, compromised footing." True to his word, the afternoon session incorporated the arriving weather. As rain began falling, turning the training area into a slippery, muddy challenge, Daniel increased the difficulty accordingly. Targets became harder to identify through the precipitation, stable positions more difficult to establish in the increasingly sodden ground. "Adversity reveals true capability," Daniel called over the rainfall. "Anyone can shoot well under ideal conditions." Olivia persevered through the deteriorating weather, applying techniques Daniel had taught for maintaining effectiveness despite environmental challenges. She discovered a surprising truth. The physical discomfort actually helped focus her attention, preventing the overthinking that sometimes plagued her performance. As the afternoon wore on, the rain intensified, eventually forcing them to conclude the outdoor portion of training. They retreated to the covered range area attached to the cabin, where Daniel had prepared one final evolution. "Low light and no light scenarios," he explained, indicating the enclosed space where light could be controlled. "Most confrontations happen in suboptimal illumination." For the next hour, they worked through progressively darker environments, using the tactical light he'd provided to identify and engage targets. Daniel emphasized techniques for managing the light source while maintaining weapon control, critical skills for home defense situations. "In darkness, whoever controls illumination controls the engagement," he explained, demonstrating how to momentarily activate the light for target identification without maintaining a constant beam that would reveal her position. By the time they concluded training, night had fallen, and the storm raged outside. Olivia began packing her gear, surprised when Daniel spoke. "Roads will be dangerous. Creek crossing on the access road likely flooded." He nodded toward the cabin. "Guest room is available if you want to wait out the worst of it." The offer made practical sense given the conditions, but represented an unexpected extension of hospitality from someone so reserved. Olivia considered her options, listening to the heavy rainfall hammering the roof. "If you're sure it's not an imposition," she replied. The creek was already running high when I arrived. Daniel nodded once. Matter settled. There's a shower. Kitchen stocked. Make yourself comfortable. Inside the cabin, Olivia discovered an interior that matched Daniel's personality. Functional, unadorned, but meticulously organized. The living area contained a simple couch, a bookshelf filled with volumes on tactical subjects and military history, and a desk with a laptop closed and centered with precise alignment. After showering and changing into clean clothes she'd fortunately packed as a spare, Olivia found Daniel in the kitchen, preparing a simple meal. Hope pasta is acceptable, he said without turning from the stove. Options are limited. Pasta is perfect, she assured him, taking a seat at the small table. Can I help with anything? He shook his head, continuing his methodical food preparation. Olivia noticed that even this mundane task was executed with the same precision he applied to tactical operations. Efficient movements, no wasted effort, complete focus on the objective. They ate dinner mostly in comfortable silence, the storm providing ambient background noise. Occasionally, Daniel's phone would light up with incoming calls or messages which he continued to ignore after brief glances. You know, Olivia ventured, if you need to take those calls, don't let me stop you. Daniel set down his fork, appearing to consider his words carefully. Carson's been calling. Wants to discuss something about the qualifier. What's so important about this competition? He seems unusually persistent. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Major sponsors attend. Contracts are offered. For some, it's a pathway to professional shooting careers. And for you? Olivia asked. What was it? He met her gaze directly. Validation, initially. Proving I could excel in a structured environment after years in chaos. His expression turned reflective. Later, it became routine. Expected. The novelty wore off. But that's not why you stopped competing, Olivia observed. It wasn't a question. Daniel's silence confirmed her assessment. After a moment, he rose and collected their empty plates, clearly indicating that particular conversational path was closed. As he washed dishes with characteristic efficiency, Olivia browsed the bookshelf, noting several volumes on combat psychology alongside tactical manuals. One book caught her attention, Aftermath, Recovery and Resilience in Combat Veterans. The spine showed more wear than the others, suggesting frequent reference. Interesting reading selection, she commented, returning to the kitchen. Daniel glanced over his shoulder. Research, he replied simply. Understanding psychological impacts improves training methodology. The storm continued unabated, rain lashing against windows while thunder rumbled in the distance. Checking her phone, Olivia found alerts about flash flooding in the area, confirming the wisdom of staying put for the night. Local news says the creek road is underwater, she reported. Good call on having me stay. Daniel nodded, finishing the dishes. Guest room is first door on the left. Bathroom adjacent. Extra blankets in the closet if needed. His tone was practical, matter of fact, but Olivia sensed something different in his demeanor. A slight tension that hadn't been present during training. Perhaps having someone in his personal space was uncomfortable for him. Thank you for your hospitality, she said. I think I'll turn in early. It's been an intense day. Daniel seemed to relax marginally at her announcement. Training resumes at 0800 if roads are clear. Weather report suggests improvement overnight. In the guest room, Olivia found simple but comfortable accommodations. A twin bed with military-tight corners on the bedding, a small dresser, and a bedside table with a reading lamp. The walls were bare, except for a framed photograph of what appeared to be a military unit, their faces obscured by tactical gear and the desert environment surrounding them. Despite physical exhaustion from the day's training, sleep proved elusive. The unfamiliar environment combined with the continuing storm kept her mind active. After an hour of restlessness, she decided to get a glass of water from the kitchen. As she approached the hallway, she heard Daniel's voice, quiet but intense, coming from what must be his room. I've made my decision, he was saying, apparently on a phone call. No, this isn't about that. 3 years is long enough. I appreciate the concern, but my reasons are my own. Olivia retreated silently, not wanting to eavesdrop on what was clearly a private conversation. Whatever Daniel was discussing, it seemed to carry emotional weight rarely displayed in his typically stoic demeanor. Back in the guest room, she finally drifted to sleep, the storm gradually diminishing outside as the night progressed. Morning arrived with surprising brightness, the storm having cleared overnight to reveal a washed-clean landscape gleaming under early sunlight. Olivia found Daniel already awake, monitoring a weather radar display on his laptop. "Creek's still high but passable," he reported without preamble. "Roads should be clear within the hour." "Good morning to you too," she replied with a smile, pouring herself coffee from the pot he'd prepared. "Sleep well." Daniel gave a non-committal nod, closing the laptop. "Today's training will incorporate buildings if you're interested in continuing. Urban environment tactics." "Absolutely," Olivia confirmed. After a moment's hesitation, she added, "Unless you have other obligations. I heard you on the phone last night. Sounded important." Daniel's expression remained neutral, but something in his posture shifted. "Just tying up loose ends. Nothing that interferes with training." They ate breakfast efficiently, then proceeded to the small structure Olivia had noticed during her first visit, what Daniel called the shoot house, a training facility designed to simulate indoor environments with reconfigurable walls and features. "Room clearing fundamentals," Daniel explained as they approached. "Different from competition shooting or range work. Requires integration of all previous skills, plus spatial awareness." The morning session focused on methodical techniques for moving through enclosed spaces, checking corners, managing fatal funnels, maintaining situational awareness while navigating complex environments. Daniel demonstrated each concept with fluid precision before having Olivia practice the movements. "Slow is smooth, smooth is fast," he repeated whenever she tried to rush. "Deliberate movement prevents mistakes. Speed develops naturally with proficiency." By midday, Olivia had progressed from basic doorway clearing to managing multiple rooms in sequence. Though they used training ammunition, non-lethal rounds that marked but couldn't penetrate, Daniel insisted on treating every evolution as though live ammunition were being used. "Training scars can be fatal," he explained. "Practice as you would execute in reality." During their lunch break, sitting on improvised seating outside the shoot house, Olivia noticed Daniel checking his phone again. This time, instead of ignoring the notification, he frowned slightly and began typing a response. "Everything okay?" she asked. He finished his message before answering. "Regional qualifier starts today. Preliminary rounds for classification. And that matters to you because?" Daniel set the phone down. "Carson's been trying to force a public reconciliation. Wants me to present an award or make an appearance. Says it would heal the community after what happened." Olivia's curiosity piqued. "What did happen? Between you two, I mean." For a long moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, with unexpected candor, he began explaining. 2 years ago, final stage of nationals. Carson was my closest competitor. During my final run, equipment malfunction caused a dangerous situation. Accidental discharge during movement. No injuries, but automatic disqualification." He paused, his expression darkening slightly. "Later discovered Carson had been in the equipment area before the stage. No proof of tampering, but suspicious timing." "He sabotaged your equipment?" Olivia asked, shocked. "Never confirmed. Never disproven. I withdrew from competition entirely rather than pursue accusations." Daniel's tone remained factual, devoid of emotion. "Some claimed I was avoiding investigation into my own negligence. Easier to let them believe that than engage in politics." "But that's not fair," Olivia protested. "If he cheated, fair is irrelevant. Reality isn't fair." Daniel stood, indicating the break was over. "What matters is effectiveness. Learning from the experience." They resumed training, moving to more advanced room-clearing techniques. Despite his outward focus on the instruction, Olivia sensed that their conversation had shifted something in Daniel's demeanor, as though sharing even that small piece of his history had opened a hairline crack in his carefully maintained composure. As the afternoon progressed, his phone continued receiving messages with increasing frequency. Finally, during a brief pause between evolutions, he checked the device and exhaled sharply. "Problem?" Olivia asked. Daniel seemed to debate internally before responding. Carson's been disqualified from the qualifier. Equipment inspection found illegal modifications to his competition rifle. Karma, Olivia suggested with a slight smile. Perhaps. Daniel pocketed the phone. Range director's requesting I attend as a neutral observer for the inspection committee. Given my background and previous situation, are you going? Daniel checked his watch. Final inspection reviews start in 2 hours. He looked at her directly. Our training is nearly complete anyway. You've developed solid fundamentals. Olivia felt an unexpected disappointment at the thought their sessions might be ending. So that's it? We're done? You have the tools now. Practice will refine them. His expression softened marginally. You've progressed faster than expected. Applied concepts effectively. Though his words were complimentary, they carried a note of finality that bothered her. After sharing so much knowledge, and yesterday even a glimpse of his personal history, it seemed wrong to simply conclude their association. I'll come with you, she decided suddenly, to the qualifier, if that's okay. Daniel studied her face, perhaps trying to determine her motivation. You're not competing. No, but I'm curious to see what all Carson's fuss has been about. Plus, she added with a small smile, I've only seen you teach. Might be educational to observe you in a different context. After a moment's consideration, he nodded once. Your choice. We leave in 30 minutes if you want to clean up first. As they drove toward the range in Daniel's truck, Olivia noticed his growing tension. Subtle indicators like tightened grip on the steering wheel and increased vigilance at intersections. Whatever his history with the competitive shooting community, returning clearly caused discomfort. You don't have to do this, she said quietly. If it's to, it's fine, he interrupted, though his tone suggested otherwise. After a pause, he added, sometimes avoidance becomes its own problem. Facing situations directly is usually more effective. Olivia nodded, understanding he was applying his tactical philosophy to a personal challenge. Well, I'll be there if you need backup. The comment earned a rare, almost smile as they continued toward what promised to be an illuminating confrontation. The regional qualifier was already bustling with activity when Daniel and Olivia arrived. Colorful sponsor banners fluttered around a transformed range complex, with competitors in logo-emblazoned shirts making final preparations. The atmosphere resembled a sporting event more than the practical training Olivia had grown accustomed to, complete with announcer's booth, vendor tents, and spectator seating. Different world, Daniel commented as they parked, his first words since they'd left his property. At the registration table, a middle-aged woman with a staff badge looked up and froze mid-greeting when she recognized Daniel. Matthews! We didn't think you'd actually come. Ray asked for my input on the inspection committee, Daniel replied simply. The woman, her badge identified her as Sandra, quickly recovered her composure. Of course, Ray's in the officials' tent. He'll be thrilled you're here. Her gaze shifted curiously to Olivia. Are you competing today? Just observing, Olivia clarified. Sandra issued them both credential badges, then leaned forward with lowered voice. Fair warning, the Reynolds situation has everyone on edge. Some of his sponsors are threatening to pull funding if the disqualification stands. Daniel absorbed this information with a single nod before guiding Olivia toward the officials' area. As they walked through the event grounds, Olivia noticed the reactions their presence, specifically Daniel's presence, generated. Conversations paused. Heads turned. Some faces registered surprise, others something closer to discomfort. You're quite the celebrity, she observed quietly. Notoriety isn't celebrity, he replied. At the officials' tent, a barrel-chested man with salt and pepper hair broke into a wide smile upon seeing them. Matthews, you magnificent bastard, you actually showed up. He engulfed Daniel in a back-slapping embrace that seemed to momentarily overwhelm Daniel's personal space preferences. Ray, Daniel acknowledged once released. This is Olivia Parker. She's been training with me. Ray extended his hand with genuine warmth. Any student of Daniel's is welcome here, though I'm surprised he's taking students at all these days. Olivia shook the offered hand. It's been educational. I bet it has, Ray chuckled. This man knows more about practical shooting than our entire officiating committee combined. His expression turned more serious. Which is exactly why I needed you here today, Daniel. We've got a situation. He led them to a private corner of the tent where a disassembled competition rifle lay on a table alongside various measuring tools and inspection equipment. Reynolds' rifle, Ray explained unnecessarily. During routine inspection, we found modifications to the trigger assembly that exceed the pull weight limitations for his division by a significant margin. When confronted, he claimed ignorance, said his gunsmith must have made a mistake. Daniel examined the disassembled components with clinical precision, testing the trigger mechanism with a calibrated gauge. 4-pound division minimum. This measures at 2¼ pounds. Not a mistake. Deliberate modification. Ray nodded grimly. That's our assessment too. Problem is, his sponsors are raising hell. One's threatening to pull event funding unless we reverse the disqualification or allow him to compete with a replacement rifle. Rules are clear, Daniel stated. Inspection failure equals disqualification. I know that, and you know that, Ray sighed. But Reynolds has cultivated relationships with key industry players. This isn't just about rules anymore, it's politics. Daniel's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. Competitive integrity shouldn't be negotiable. Which is exactly why I called you, Ray replied. Your reputation for uncompromising standards is well known. Having you on the inspection committee gives our decision credibility that even Reynolds' sponsors can't easily dismiss. Before Daniel could respond, a commotion erupted outside the tent. Raised voices approached, one particularly familiar. I have every right to know who's reviewing my equipment. Carson's distinctive voice carried clearly. This whole process has been a witch hunt from the start. He burst into the tent, flanked by 2 men in corporate-branded polo shirts. Sponsor representatives, Olivia guessed. Carson stopped short when he spotted Daniel, his expression cycling rapidly through surprise, anger, and finally calculated composure. Well, he said, forcing a tight smile. Now it all makes sense. The mysterious disqualification happens right when Matthews decides to reappear. The trigger assembly fails inspection by nearly 2 pounds, Daniel replied evenly. There's nothing mysterious about it. One of the sponsor representatives stepped forward. Mr. Reynolds has offered to compete with a replacement firearm that meets all specifications. Surely that's a reasonable accommodation. Ray shook his head. Rules explicitly state that equipment violations result in disqualification from the entire event, not just from using that particular firearm. Rules can have reasonable exceptions, the sponsor insisted. Our company has invested considerably in this event. Perhaps we should discuss this season's continued support. The implied threat hung in the air. Ray's expression revealed the difficult position he faced, maintaining competitive integrity while ensuring the event's financial viability. Carson seized the moment of hesitation. This feels suspiciously personal. First, Matthews disappears after his own equipment, malfunction, then reappears just in time to question mine? He directed his gaze at Daniel. Some might call that suspicious timing. Some might, Daniel agreed coolly. Just as some might question how a professional shooter wouldn't notice his competition trigger was set at half the required pull weight. Carson's face flushed. Are you accusing me of deliberately cheating? I'm stating facts. The trigger fails inspection. Whether by intention or negligence doesn't change the outcome. The second sponsor representative intervened. Gentlemen, perhaps we can discuss this more productively. Mr. Matthews, you've been away from competition for some time. Perhaps rules interpretations have evolved in your absence. Physics hasn't evolved, Daniel replied. 4 pounds is still 4 pounds. Throughout this exchange, Olivia observed the dynamics with growing clarity. Carson's charismatic personality and sponsor relationships had created a protective ecosystem around him, one that prioritized his continued participation over strict rule enforcement. Daniel's presence threatened that arrangement, precisely because he couldn't be intimidated or cajoled. Ray cleared his throat. The inspection committee will make its final determination within the hour. In the meantime, all parties should prepare for the official ruling. This diplomatic non-answer temporarily diffused the situation. Carson departed with his sponsor representatives, but not before casting a venomous glance at Daniel. This isn't over, he muttered as he passed. When they were alone again, Ray exhaled heavily. That went about as well as expected. You knew bringing me in would escalate tensions, Daniel observed. I did, Ray admitted. But I also knew you'd stand firm on the rules, regardless of pressure. That's what we need right now. Daniel examined the rifle components once more. The modification is deliberate. Professional gunsmithing, not amateur work. He knew. Ray nodded. I believe you. Question is, do we have the backbone to enforce the rules when it might cost us sponsorship? If rules only apply when convenient, they're not rules. Daniel's voice carried quiet conviction. They're suggestions. Olivia, who had remained silent during the confrontation, found herself admiring Daniel's unwavering principles. In a world where compromise seemed the easier path, his clarity was refreshing. Ray glanced between them. The committee meets in 20 minutes. Until then, why not show your student around? Might be educational to see what competitive shooting looks like these days. Daniel seemed reluctant, but Olivia's interested expression apparently changed his mind. Brief tour, he conceded. As they walked through the event grounds, Daniel provided terse but informative commentary on the various competition stages. Each was designed to test different shooting skills, speed, accuracy, movement, decision-making, all within a structured, scored format. Impressive setups, Olivia noted, watching competitors navigate challenging courses of fire. But very different from what you've been teaching me. Different purpose, Daniel explained. Competition creates artificial scenarios with known parameters. Reality presents unknown variables with consequences beyond scoring points. They paused at a particularly complex stage involving multiple shooting positions and target arrays. The current competitor, a woman perhaps a few years older than Olivia, moved through the course with impressive speed and precision. Her technique is solid, Daniel acknowledged. Good balance between speed and accuracy. This rare compliment drew Olivia's attention to the shooter's performance. Indeed, there was a fluid confidence to her movements that spoke of thousands of practice hours. Catherine Wallace, came a voice from behind them. 3-time women's division champion. Nearly beat Reynolds at Nationals last year. They turned to find Ray approaching. Committees gathering early. Sponsors are pressing for a quick decision. Daniel nodded, then turned to Olivia. This might take some time. Feel free to watch the competition. Actually, Ray interjected, I'd like Olivia to join us if she's willing. As someone new to the sport but familiar with Matthew's instruction, her perspective might be valuable. Surprised but intrigued, Olivia agreed. They followed Ray to a small conference room where several people already waited around a table. The rifle components had been relocated here, laid out for examination. The committee members, mostly older men with decades of competition experience, reacted to Daniel's arrival with the same mixture of surprise and wariness Olivia had noticed throughout the event. Ray made brief introductions before explaining Olivia's presence as an independent observer. The discussion began with a technical review of the rifle's modifications. Even to Olivia's relatively untrained eye, the alterations seemed deliberate and sophisticated. The trigger assembly has been professionally reworked, confirmed a white-haired gentleman identified as the head armorer. Custom sear engagement, lightened springs, polished contact surfaces. Precision work that reduces pull weight well below division requirements. Could it be unintentional? Asked another committee member. A gunsmith's error? The armorer shook his head. Not likely. This level of modification requires specific intent. Every competitive shooter knows their division's requirements. Reynolds claims he was unaware, Ray noted. Says his sponsor's gunsmith made adjustments without explaining their nature. Daniel, who had been examining the components silently, looked up. The rifle shows wear patterns consistent with extensive use. Not a recent modification. This observation shifted the room's energy. If the illegal modifications had been present during extensive practice, or worse, previous competitions, the implications were far more serious than a single disqualification. We need to review his previous match videos, suggested a committee member. Check for telltale signs of lighter trigger pull. As the technical discussion continued, the door opened and the sponsor representatives entered, accompanied by Carson. The atmosphere immediately tensed. "We've been waiting for nearly an hour," the lead sponsor representative complained. "The preliminary rounds are well underway. If Mr. Reynolds is to compete with a replacement firearm, a decision must be made immediately." Ray maintained his composure. "The committee is conducting a thorough review, as required by competition rules. We appreciate your patience." Carson stepped forward, his charismatic personality on full display. "Look, I understand the committee's position. Rules exist for good reason, but surely we can acknowledge that a simple mistake shouldn't end my season before it begins." He gestured toward the disassembled rifle. "I trusted my equipment maintainer. Perhaps unwisely, but without malicious intent." The appeal was skillfully delivered, reasonable, humble, appealing to empathy rather than rules. Olivia noticed several committee members' expressions softening. "Perhaps a compromise," suggested one member. "Disqualification from this event, but eligibility for future qualifiers with properly inspected equipment." The sponsor representatives nodded eagerly at this suggestion. Carson maintained a carefully contrite expression. Daniel, who had remained silent throughout this exchange, finally spoke. Before deciding, the committee should review this. He placed his phone on the table, displaying a paused video. Footage from last year's national championship. Reynolds' Stage 7 run. With a tap, the video began playing. It showed Carson executing a complex course of fire with the fluid precision of a top competitor. Daniel paused the video at a specific moment, zooming in on Carson's trigger finger during a rapid-fire sequence. "Note the trigger manipulation," Daniel directed. "Minimal displacement, characteristic of a significantly sub-regulation trigger pull weight." He swiped to another video. "State championship, 3 months ago. Same technique, same minimal displacement." The evidence was compelling even to Olivia's untrained eye. The trigger barely moved during firing, suggesting minimal resistance. Exactly what would result from the modifications they'd discovered. Carson's carefully composed expression cracked. "Those videos prove nothing. Different angles can make trigger movement appear less pronounced." "Ballistic analysis suggests otherwise," Daniel countered. "Your split times between shots are consistently faster than competitors using regulation triggers, yet your accuracy doesn't suffer proportionally. Physics doesn't lie." The room fell silent as the implications settled. This wasn't a one-time mistake, but a pattern of deliberate advantage-seeking. Carson's expression hardened as he realized the changing tide. His gaze fixed on Daniel. Rich, coming from someone who rage-quit competition after his own disqualification. "Everyone here knows you couldn't handle losing your perfect record. Now you're back to sabotage mine." "Is that what happened?" Daniel asked quietly. "I rage-quit?" "We all saw it," Carson pressed, addressing the room rather than Daniel directly. "Equipment malfunctioned during the final stage." Convenient timing when his lead was slipping. Then, rather than face the music, he disappears completely. Daniel stood slowly. "Let me clarify something." His voice remained measured but carried throughout the now silent room. "I withdrew from competition after my disqualification because the investigation would have revealed something I preferred to keep private." He pulled up another video on his phone, surveillance footage from what appeared to be an equipment staging area. The timestamp indicated it was from the national championship 2 years prior. The grainy footage showed someone in a sponsor-branded shirt approaching a table of staged equipment. The figure glanced around furtively before making adjustments to one of the firearms. Though the person's face wasn't clearly visible, the distinctive sponsor logos matched what Carson had worn that day. Quote, "Range surveillance," Daniel explained. "Never publicly released because I chose not to pursue the matter. I decided competitive shooting no longer aligned with my priorities." The revelation landed like a thunderbolt. Carson's face drained of color. "That could be anyone. The quality is too poor to identify. The jacket features the limited edition sponsor pattern you received for breaking the regional record that season," Daniel interrupted. "Only 3 were produced. The other 2 recipients weren't at that championship." The sponsor representatives exchanged alarmed glances. One whispered urgently to the other before hastily exiting the room, presumably to contact headquarters. Carson's composure finally shattered. You had this all along? You could have cleared your name, but instead you just walked away. Why? Daniel regarded him steadily. Because winning plastic trophies stopped mattering after I'd seen what real consequences look like. Because I realized I was perpetuating a system that valued appearances over substance. His gaze swept the room. Because sometimes walking away from a corrupted environment is more principled than fighting to remain within it. Ray cleared his throat in the heavy silence that followed. I believe the committee has sufficient information to make its determination now. If non-members would please step outside. As they exited, Carson caught Daniel's arm. You've ruined me, he hissed. Those sponsors were my livelihood. You ruined yourself, Daniel replied evenly. I simply chose not to participate in the fiction any longer. In the hallway outside, Olivia processed what she'd witnessed. The competitive shooting world suddenly seemed like a microcosm of larger society, complete with politics, compromised values, and rare individuals who stood apart by maintaining their principles regardless of personal cost. Daniel leaned against the wall beside her, looking somehow both burdened and relieved. Not what you expected from your training evolution. Actually, Olivia reflected, it might be the most important lesson yet. Standing your ground isn't just physical. The committee deliberation lasted barely 15 minutes. When the door reopened, Ray emerged looking simultaneously exhausted and resolved. The committee has confirmed Carson Reynolds' disqualification from this event and all qualifying events for the remainder of the season, he announced formally. Furthermore, his previous national championship title is under review pending forensic analysis of his competition equipment from that event. Carson, who had been pacing nearby, stopped cold. You can't do that. That title is already recorded. The sponsors have already begun distancing themselves, Ray finished for him. Integrity matters in this sport, Carson. It always has. We just forgot that for a while. As Carson stormed away, Ray turned to Daniel. You could have revealed this 2 years ago. Saved yourself a lot of speculation and rumors. Wouldn't have changed anything that mattered, Daniel replied. Ray smiled sadly. Maybe. Maybe not. He extended his hand. The committee has another proposition for you. We need someone with unimpeachable standards to overhaul our inspection protocols. A consultant position, good compensation, minimal politics. Daniel didn't immediately accept the handshake. I'm not interested in rejoining the competition circuit, not asking you to compete, asking you to help ensure others compete fairly. Ray's expression turned earnest. You walked away because the system was compromised. Help us fix it instead. After a contemplative moment, Daniel shook the offered hand. I'll consider it. As they left the building, the competition continued around them, though now with a subdued energy following the dramatic disqualification. Several competitors nodded respectfully toward Daniel as they passed, perhaps acknowledging his integrity after years of misunderstanding his withdrawal. What will you do? Olivia asked as they reached the parking area. Daniel considered the question. Evaluate Ray's offer. Might be an opportunity to implement meaningful changes. And our training, she ventured, realizing how much she'd come to value their sessions. You've mastered the fundamentals, he replied. Application and refinement come through practice. Though his answer was factually accurate, Olivia sensed there was more he wasn't saying. I've learned more from you in a week than in months of classes elsewhere. Not just about shooting, about principles, about standing firm when it matters. Daniel studied her face, perhaps recognizing the sincerity in her words. There's more I could teach, he acknowledged, if you're interested in continuing. I am, she confirmed without hesitation. Then we continue tomorrow, 09:00. We'll work on integrated skills, combining everything you've learned into functional capability. As they drove away from the competition, Olivia noticed a subtle shift in Daniel's demeanor. A certain tension had eased, as though confronting his past had released a burden he'd carried silently for years. You knew, she realized suddenly. You knew Carson was using illegal modifications at this competition before Ray called you. Daniel kept his eyes on the road, but a slight inclination of his head confirmed her assessment. Carson's approach to competition hasn't changed. He consistently values appearances over substance, shortcuts over earned skill. A hint of something almost like satisfaction touched his expression. But patterns have consequences eventually. Is that why you agreed to help me? Olivia asked. You saw me struggling with fundamentals and recognized someone genuinely trying to learn, not just appear competent? Partially, Daniel admitted. Also recognized someone facing real stakes, not artificial ones. Someone for whom capability might mean survival, not trophies. The simple acknowledgement warmed her more than effusive praise might have. Daniel's respect wasn't easily earned, which made it all the more valuable. As they turned onto the road leading back to his property, Olivia reflected on the dramatic transformation of her life in just 1 week. From a frightened teacher jumping at shadows to someone developing genuine capability. From seeking false security in a basic firearm to understanding the deeper principles of self-protection. Thank you, she said simply, for everything you've taught me. Daniel glanced at her briefly before returning his attention to the road. You did the work. I just provided direction. Well, I'm grateful for that direction. It's changed more than just my shooting skills. Daniel nodded, acknowledging her words without unnecessary elaboration. As they continued toward his property where tomorrow's training would resume, Olivia realized that perhaps the most valuable lesson wasn't about firearms at all, but about living with clarity of purpose and unwavering principles, a lesson Daniel taught not through words but through his every action. The Navy SEAL who had placed his combat rifle in her hands hadn't disappeared after all. He had simply been waiting for someone who valued substance over appearance, reality over illusion, and was willing to do the difficult work of genuine transformation. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.